Hello and welcome to tonight's Science and Conservation event brought to you by the Zoological Society of London. I'm going to call it ZSL from now on, and also from WildCats Conservation Alliance. While many of you may be familiar with ZSL, you may be less acquainted with WildCats Conservation Alliance. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about them. So it's an initiative of ZSL and Dreamworld Wildlife Foundation working out of London Zoo. WildCats acts as an honest broker between the international zoo community, the general public and corporate organisations who want to donate to independently reviewed wild tiger and Amur leopard conservation projects which have real impact in the landscapes they work in. WildCats also works to deliver updates from these projects to donors and the public to garner engagement and support of the dedicated work being done across Asia to protect these species from extinction. We currently work with implementing partners in 5 tiger range countries and have helped fund over 103 monitoring, protection, conflict resolution, firefighting and awareness raising projects. My name is Amy and I'm going to be chairing this evening's event. I am the science communicator for WildCats Conservation Alliance, and my role involves facilitating communication between conservationists and the rest of society, translating their knowledge into a format that can be widely understood through effective storytelling. But that is enough about me. We're all here to talk tigers. So from an estimated population of around 100,000 individuals at the beginning of the 20th century, wild tiger numbers plummeted to as few as 3,200 by 2010, occupying just 7% of their original range. The severity of this collapse prompted one of the greatest examples of political will ever mustered for the protection of a single species, as countries came together to create the Global Tiger Recovery Programme. The aim was to double the number of wild tigers across their geographical range by the next year of the tiger in 2022. In September this year, the Second International Tiger Forum assembled world leaders, intergovernmental bodies, NGOs and conservation experts to determine the next phase of the Global Tiger Recovery Programme and establish the Vladivostok Declaration of Tiger Conservation, signed by all range countries for tigers. But what does this all really mean for the future of tigers? Well, we've brought together 4 brilliant speakers for you today to discuss the impact of the decisions made and the need to address human-tiger coexistence, wildlife crime, and habitat protection to secure the future of this iconic species. But before we begin, I'd like to remind you of how you can take part in tonight's event, because we would love to hear from you. So, let me just share this again for you. We welcome your questions for our speakers. There are 2 ways you can do this. You can go to our Pigeonhole webpage at www.pigeonhole.at/1931. That's www.pigeonhole.at/1931, and there you can type in your questions for our speakers. If your question is for a particular speaker, then please do remember to state their name in the question. On that webpage, you can also upvote other people's questions. So if there's one that you would like to know the answer to, please vote for it and we will try and answer the most highly voted for questions. So if for any reason you can't access that webpage, then you can also email us your questions to scientific.events@zsl.org. So that's also on the screen here, and we will add them to the Pigeonhole for you. I'll be reminding you of these details later on. They are also in the YouTube description below. And at the end of the event, I'll be sharing a SurveyMonkey link with you because it's really important for us to hear what you think. But for now, let's get back to tonight's event. Our first speaker is Keshav Varma, the founding director and chief executive officer for the World Bank's Global Tiger Initiative. He is a big name in tiger conservation, so we're really lucky to have him today. The Global Tiger Initiative is largely responsible for facilitating partnerships between 13 tiger range countries and international partners to save the world's remaining wild tigers. Keshav has guided and coordinated some of the most ambitious and far-reaching conservation projects and has helped raise over a staggering $275 million for wildlife conservation by bringing various funding partners together. His contribution to the development of wildlife business councils, smart green infrastructure, and increasing the interface between private sector and wildlife conservation have been remarkable breakthroughs towards changing the conversation about conservation. Keshav is now facilitating the implementation of the Global Tiger Recovery Programme to ensure the impact on the front lines of conservation. As you can imagine, Keshav is an extremely busy man, so we are, as I said before, very lucky to have him here tonight to give some background on the history of the Global Tiger Initiative and an overview of the Global Tiger Recovery Programme. So now I'll hand over to Keshav.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a very nice Amy introduction. I'm just now in the Corbett landscape in India, which has the highest density of tigers in the world. It's almost 20 tigers per 100 square kilometers. And this national park has over 250 tigers. So it's an amazing place. And if you ever come here, and I'd like to invite all of you to come and see tigers, because the last time I was here, in the grasslands behind Dahal, 4 of these tigers were chasing a herd of elephants down the road, and it was a rather interesting sight to see. So we are in the tiger country just now, and I'm happy to convey that tiger situation in India has really improved. There are more than 3,200 tigers, and the latest census is being done by Wildlife Institute of India. So, and they are expecting another 10 to 15% increase. This number was 1411 in 2008. And the situation was so grim that at the World Bank, we decided to also go in and as a convener of countries to launch an initiative known as the Global Tiger Initiative, which was launched under the presidentship of the then president of the World Bank, Mr. Robert Zoellick. And I used to be director of urban development, but then I also took over as the program director at that time of the Tiger Initiative. This is when we started looking at all the 13 tiger range countries and thought there should be a single path forward, because there was a fragmentation of approach and there was this issue of everybody trying to do their own thing, and we needed a converging way forward. So we developed the entire system or a framework of national tiger recovery programs at the country level, and all of them converging into a global tiger recovery program. So in 2009 and by 2010, this was ready, and all the countries reported back the situation in the 13 tiger range countries. The interesting part and the most amazing thing that happened in 2010 was when Mr. Zoellick, our president, met Mr. Putin in Moscow, and they discussed tigers. And initially, when the meeting was taking place, the interpreter thought that Mr. Zoellick was actually talking about tiger economies in East Asia. And when he was corrected and told that it wasn't about tiger economies, it was about real wild tigers. So Putin got extremely interested, and then they decided jointly to co-host the Tiger Summit, or what they call the International Tiger Forum, at St. Petersburg. And I suppose Debbie is here among the people and partners who came together, but the entire conservation world turned up with more than 5 prime ministers and all countries represented through their cabinet ministers and everything. It was an amazing event. And that event actually raised the profile of tiger conservation in the world. It really brought a sense of awareness not only towards tiger conservation, but also awareness about the fact that if you conserve and protect tigers, you are also conserving the forest and other species, tiger being the apex. So that led to a lot of convergence. All our partners came together, and we could raise more than $270 million to finance several programs across the country. So that was extremely gratifying to see what happened at that time at 2010. And the follow-up was that the number of tiger parks went up. India had at that time, I think, about 35. Now we have 53 parks. Nepal increased the number of its parks. Bhutan increased them. Bangladesh increased them. But the interesting part was that there was a lot of effort towards tightening up the legislation against illegal trade and traffic, as well as, really driving toward against poaching and trying to raise resources, national resources. All our partners came forward and they contributed towards development of a vibrant and a dynamic program. The St. Peter's, agreement actually committed ourselves to doubling the number of tigers in the country by 2022. The results have been rather uneven, however. It's a bit of a differentiated impact that has taken place despite all the efforts and despite all the buildup. And during this period, what has happened is that South Asia has emerged as very stable. And last August, we did one of these senior officials meeting, and then we had this meeting in September in Vladivostok. India has doubled the number of its tigers from 1,411 to more than 3,200. What Nepal has doubled its number of tigers. Bhutan has almost doubled the number of tigers. Bangladesh is rather stable, and they've all adopted a scientific way of tiger management, including census. I think Indonesia is doing rather well. From the reports that were given by Russia, they have over 700 tigers in Amur tigers, and Amur tigers have not only increased, but also the Amur leopards. In the Chai Bai Shan sector, which is the, the border of China and Russia, number of tigers have actually moved into China, and China is now conveying that they have more than 50 tigers, which is heartening to know because tigers had gone extinct in China. After that, if you go into Southeast Asia, the situation is rather grim. Myanmar, which had the Hukong Valley and a potential of holding more than 10,000 tigers, I think the reports are that they are not more than 20 in Myanmar. Thailand has lost half of its tigers. Malaysia has lost half its tigers. And 3 countries are Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Tigers have gone extinct. So it's a pretty grim situation. And Myanmar is on the verge of extinction. Now, we all came together to really reflect on this issue, because this is truly something that we'll all be talking as we talk today. But South Asia is stable, as I said, and this is the situation. Russia is doing very well. China is moving forward. Indonesia appears to be stable. We don't have very good information on it, but I'm told that it is doing rather well in Sumatra. Now, what has happened in Southeast Asia, and this is my personal experience also, as I was also director of East Asia for urban development, and as I was traveling rather extensively there, poaching and tiger farms and the demand, and I am sure Debbie is going to talk about it, has really created a situation in which illegal trade for tiger parts and derivatives has actually increased. It is rather vibrant. It is rather intense, and the demand is intense. Tiger farms have mushroomed in China. I think there are more than 6,500 to 7,000 tigers in China in the tiger farms. Tiger farms are now in Vietnam. They are in Myanmar. They are in Laos. They are probably in Cambodia. And I'm also hearing news about tiger farms mushrooming in Malaysia and Thailand. I don't know under what name, but this is probably, Debbie will be able to give a better picture of it. Now, what is happening is that these tiger farms have not been controlled by CITES. I mean, CITES has, as an organization, has completely failed and has been rather political and has not been able to control the situation of tiger farms. I mean, it's right from 2008 till 2022. I have dealt with CITES. I have not seen any results coming out. There was an effort to really review what is going on, and the Chinese resisted, and nothing came forward. So tiger farms exist, demand is intense, and that is creating a problem. In India, where the number of tigers have gone up, and in South Asia, habitat is under stress. It has not only deteriorated, but it has shrunk. And as a result, because there are more tigers, we are seeing a lot of tiger-human conflicts emerging. That is a feature all across South Asia. And that is something that we'll have to talk about because we are faced every day. You'll be surprised, not just tigers, but I go for a walk in the Forest Research Institute in Dehradun, and we are told that after 5 o'clock, we should not go for a walk because there are leopards in that area. I mean, this is right in the heart of the city. The golf course here, where the Indian Military Academy is, reporting 2 leopards there. So there is a lot of dispersal of predators in urban areas and on the fringes, and we have to deal with it. Resources are really showing a dip. We did a gap analysis, and there is a need for about $170 million, which is not there, to actually maintain the situation of, just number of, staff in the front line. They don't have the resources. Some of the countries like Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam, who are trying to move it forward, don't have the resources to really put people on the ground and to really combat the situation. So resources are a big problem. Even in spite of COVID, the environmental issues have not really emerged as a priority. Actually, to the contrary, I am seeing that after COVID, environment has really dipped as a priority in most of the countries. As I said, habitat is, excuse me, is showing a tremendous amount of pressure. And I think there'll be several presentations after my presentation. Now, the positives are that, firstly, in South Asia, tiger numbers have stabilized. India, Nepal, Bhutan, and Kazakhstan has recently come forward in a rather strong manner with a lot of political backup to bring back the tiger in Kazakhstan. There was a time they had the tigers. They have now been able to, identify a huge area where there is enough prey base, and they are very keen to bring tigers from Russia. I think there's the same subspecies. So that's a good issue. Russia and China border at Chaibashan is showing almost 50 tigers in China, which is again rather heartening to see. The number of tigers have really increased because of very strong measures in Russia last I had heard in 2010, there were about 300. Now they are saying there are more than 700 tigers, including, of course, cubs and other this thing. In terms of Southeast Asia, there is also a convergence of partners and countries towards creating a financial strategy, a fund or a bond to really pull the situation of Southeast Asia together. We are working on it. I am also working on it. We are trying to bring in industry, private sector, and businesses into it. So that is good, and partners are extremely active. So let me say, in the end, I'd like to say on the 29th and 30th, we are having a follow-up GTRP meeting in India again, and this will follow up on the Vladivostok St. Peter's summit. At Vladivostok, there has been a strong signal towards stopping this tiger farms. Very strong signal. The representative of Mr. Putin, in his interaction with me, came forward with a very strong commitment to stop that. Now, how we're going to do it in COPs and other things, we shall see. But that needs to stop. Tiger farms have to be erased and controlled. Otherwise, tigers in the wild would continue to suffer from demand. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you, and for the opportunity to convey what's going on in the ground. And we need all your support and all your awareness building that you're doing just now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keshav. And yeah, for that brilliant overview of the Global Tiger Initiative, the Global Tiger Recovery Programme, and the current situation for tigers, especially with regards to the tiger farms, which I know Debbie is going to touch upon later as well for us. So we're going to have a couple of minutes of questions for you, and just while we wait for some more questions to come in, to our audience, please do get typing. Let me remind you of just how you can get involved. You can go to the Pigeonhole webpage, which is here, the URL www.pigeonhole.at/1931, and type in your questions for our speakers. And if you can't access the webpage, then you can email us your questions to scientific.events@zsl.org, and we'll add them to the Pigeonhole for you. We've got a couple of questions here already. Obviously, if we don't get to any of the questions, we can talk about them later in the panel discussion. Some of them might be a bit more appropriate to discuss with everyone. But the first question I'm going to ask is, so it's from Anonymous, but they said, it's good to hear about the success of this ambitious multi-country conservation initiative. Do participating countries contribute financially to countries with less resource for tiger conservation?
Beg your pardon, could you repeat that?
Yeah, no problem. So the question was, it's good to hear about the success of this ambitious multi-country conservation initiative. Do participating countries contribute financially to countries with less resource for tiger conservation?
There appears to be some movement in this regard. It's a very interesting question. And I have more information than I can divulge really about it, but there appears to be, I can say, some movement, and there are some MOUs, bilateral MOUs coming up, and they can be fund, which should be able to, fill in to an extent these gaps that exist today. So let me convey, yes, and there is a need for countries together, come together, especially in Southeast Asia, supporting Southeast Asia.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. Some of the other questions we've got, I think I'll ask them in the panel session later. But yeah, thank you so much for your talk, Keshav. So our next speaker tonight is Dr. Bhagawan Dahal, the Deputy Country Manager of the Zoological Society of London in Nepal. Bhagawan's been affiliated with ZSL since 2015 with almost 2 decades of experience in the conservation sector. He has extensive knowledge on the practicalities of conservation with his experience at ZSL and previously in the National Trust for Nature Conservation, BirdLife International and the Red Panda Network. Bhagawan is presenting his work on behalf of Dr. Baral, Country Director for ZSL's Nepal office, who was unfortunately unable to join the event tonight due to illness. Their team have overseen several projects focusing on tigers, their prey base and habitat conservation. Bhagawan will be joining us today to talk about conserving tigers in Nepal's Teriak landscape with a particular focus on human-tiger coexistence. So please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much for giving this platform to talk about tiger conservation work in Nepal. As you said that I work for ZSN Nepal office as deputy country manager. My country director is not feeling well. That's why I'm, stepping in to give a talk here. Nepal is, a small landlocked country, but we have contributed actually 23.39% of the country land mass, as under the protected area management systems under different, IUCN categories. We have 12 national parks, 1 wildlife reserves, 1 hunting reserve, and 6 conservation areas. Our tiger bearing protected areas share the habitat with Indian tigers landscapes also. Talking about the Tarai Arc landscapes and tiger bearing protected areas in Nepal, we have 5 tiger bearing protected areas in Tarai Arc landscapes. In total, over 5,500 square kilometer is the area that has been strictly protected for tiger conservation. And then outside the protected areas, we have over 2,000 square kilometer that have been considered as a potential tiger habitat. That's why we have given protected forest status and corridor status. In total, 7,600 square kilometer have been protected by the strict protection tiger protection management regime in Nepal. Talking about the success of tiger conservation in Nepal made a remarkable success of tiger conservation, and despite the poverty and several challenges that our people are facing, Nepal doubled the tigers in over 12 years. The increment of tigers from over 100 numbers in 2008 to 355 tigers in 2022. This result is actually a country's dedicated effort for tiger conservation. There is also huge contribution of conservation partners, including Zoological Society of London, Nepal, under the leadership of Department of National Parks Wildlife Conservation to this achievement. There are also key conservation partners, for example, National Trust for Nature Conservation, WWF, IUCN. We all are working together under the leadership of the government of Nepal to get this success. If we look at the protected area-wise tiger distributions in Nepal, we have, of course, a larger area of protected areas harbors more tigers. Chittagong National Park and the Bardhan National Park, they have high number of tigers than compared to other tiger recovery sites, for example, Suklakhata National Park, Banke National Park, and Parsa National Park. So, the important thing is that the tiger numbers are significantly increased, even in tiger recovery sites. So that indicates that country's effort was made in equal, proportion, regardless of the size of the protected area. So the investment was in equal proportions, throughout the protected areas. So how did we achieve this success? So there has been a huge, effort made in terms of institutional arrangement, policy reformations, and then funding arrangements to make this happen. We had the we have a National Tiger Conservation Committee, an apex, level of tiger conservation committee that is, under the leadership of honorable prime ministers. We have the policy level, wildlife crime control coordination committee at the ministerial level, and we have, a Department of National Parks Wildlife Conservation is a focal department for wildlife conservation in Nepal that is at the executive level. And then at the implementation level, we have, protected area director, and then divisional forest offices, and each sectors and range posts. So the beauty of this structure is it has ensured the participation of local communities, community-based enterprise units. They are the network of the local peoples. They are also included, in this system. Besides these structures, we have also parliamentary committee. That parliamentary committee is primarily, supporting to this structure to facilitate policy reformation related to tiger conservation and also overall, biodiversity conservation. So this kind of very, clear roles and responsibilities at the different level is a unique I think, unique model of conservation, in Nepal. I mean, besides the enforcement, the government of Nepal, together with the conservation partners, actually made effort in expanding the protected area network. So Bakken National Park, that has 896 square kilometers that has been added to the network, protected area network systems. And similarly, Parsa National Park, we have also added 128 square kilometers. The potential habitat has been annexed to the Parsa National Park. So over 1,000 square kilometers has been included into the protected area network systems in 12 years. So, and besides this expansion of the protected area network, the government, together with conservation partners, are also investing huge amount of resources in management of habitat, for example, grassland management, wetland management, and also removal of invasive species. These are the key interventions that we are making, in our protected area system. So, and these habitat management interventions have improved the habitat quality for tiger, and then, tiger and their prey base. Besides this, we are also promoting assisted regenerations, by guided fencing. This kind of approach protects the crop damage or livestock depredation by wildlife. At the same time, and this also prevents visiting livestock to the national park, to the core area. These practices are primarily implementing along the edge of the national park. Despite this effort, there is still a big challenge in tiger conservation. In the last 7-8 years, nearly 53 tigers were killed. Actually, this number primarily, by the natural death, but there are also poaching and then, poisoning cases have been recorded in the tiger landscapes. Similarly, 29, people were killed by the tiger in the last 5-6 years. So, this indicates that this shows that there is still issues, with tiger conservation, and then the conflict, remains a big issue, for this. So we need to act. Promptly and appropriately to address the conflict associated with tigers and also other wildlife. Before getting too late, I think we need to, act towards addressing the problems that local people are facing. It is vital to address, the issues, problems that local people are facing in the tiger landscapes. The empowerment of the local peoples who are guarding tigers, it is the key. This is the key for survival of tigers. So JRSL, in collaboration with the government, several interventions have been implementing in the tiger landscape. That includes habitat management work. We also provide support to the government for regular monitoring of tigers and its prey base, and also rapid communication response to address the problematic animals as well as conflict associated with the wildlife, and then fencing the village, protecting livestock from the predation, and also assisting the local communities in accessing the common compensation. These are the key interventions that we have been working together with the local communities. We have a buffer zone program. This buffer zone program is primarily is the people-centered program, and we have been practicing this community participations in nature resource management since 1998. This allows the local community to access the income or revenue collected by the park. So over 30 to 50% park revenue will flow back to the communities, and that will be spent on the different conservation categories by the community themselves. Another milestone, in the favor of local people is the endorsement of wildlife damage relief support guideline that was endorsed in 2010. The main objective is to provide relief fund to the affected communities for the loss of property and also human casualties. We can see here, in the last amendment, the government endorsed that if the human death occur, $1 million will be supported as a relief support. And then if the injured minor or major cases, for the minor $200, and for the major injury $200 US dollars they receive. And other damages made by the wildlife, and then crop damage made by the herbivores, there is small mechanism, small support by the government. For example, $300 if adult buffalo or ox are killed by the wildlife. And for the crop damage, minimum support, for example, just 10,000, that Nepalese rupee, that means $100 will be compensated. So these claims they have to make within 35 days. So these are some claims that ZSL is working with the government. For example, our collaborations with the government is for habitat management, expansion of protected area network, and also introducing the conservation technology to tackle the wildlife crime, and also as an early warning system to inform the local communities about the wildlife movement in the villages. Similarly, enhancing the park facilities by providing support in construction of guard posts and also watch towers, view towers. These initiatives have helped to enhance the park facilities so that they can, their morale will boost up and they will work, effectively for tiger conservation. And these are community initiatives. For example, we support ecotourism. We have also community banking approaches so that community manage the financial support that project managed, by themselves for the benefits of, for the benefits to enhance their livelihood. And if they have to go for, other financial mechanism options, they have to pay high interest. But when they have their own fund, they can utilize that fund in soft loans. Lots of homestays and community-based ecotourism have been supported through the projects to improve their livelihood and also to reduce their dependency on forest resources. And then another thing is community-based livestock farming and then vegetable farming. These are the key activities, livelihood activities that local communities are practicing. So we are just strengthening what they are doing as a subsistence livelihood. Similarly,
Bhagawan, I'll just say, can you just for timekeeping, just to let you know you've got.
Sorry,
no, it's fine.
We have also supported for compensation fund, in partnership with the government of Nepal. So what talking about these achievement, but there is what I said before, that there is still challenges for tiger conservation. Dr. Keshav Varma said that the habitat degradation, fragmentations of wildlife habitat, these are the actually, threatening the wildlife, including tigers in our landscapes. So there is also, a rising human-wildlife conflict in tiger landscapes, and then controlling wildlife crime is challenging, in our area, especially when our landscape shares with the transboundary counterparts. Management of invasive species and zoonotic disease and balancing conservation developments are the key, challenges that we need to focus in the days to come. And then, in the recent days, we have also noticed that adverse impact of climate change on tigers and other wildlife species. So, as a way forward, I think we need to promote human-wildlife coexistence, because we cannot exclude people from the conservation. That's why this is this should be a primary objective, in the next 12 years. And then similarly, zero tolerance. We should have zero tolerance against the wildlife crime, and we need to expand the species-focused ecosystem approach. Similarly, climate resilient, adaptive management, inclusive and good governance, participatory approach, and sustainable financing mechanism from protected systems. These are the key things that if we are able to catch this, we will definitely, achieve our goal, target to promote and human-wildlife coexistence. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Bhagawan. And thank you again for stepping in for him. It was really interesting to hear, obviously from a country that has not only doubled its tiger population, but in fact nearly tripled it. One of the questions that we've had come in is, what would be the main advice that you would offer to projects in other countries about how to plan for conflict mitigation and human-wildlife coexistence?
I think we need to have, people-centric livelihood initiatives in partnership with local communities and the authority. Number one, and number two is, law enforcement is again very important, especially in tiger recovery sites. We have 20 or 25 tigers. And these tigers can be killed by one go. And next is sustainable financing mechanism, so that local people, they get ensured that they will be getting benefits from the protected area system. I think these things we need to consider, to promote human wildlife coexistence, and also to gain the confidence and also support of local communities for tiger conservation. The important thing is partnership under the leadership of the government. They are the authority.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. And yeah, I've got some more questions, but I'm going to ask them in the panel session afterwards, just so that I don't keep up Nathan, who's our next speaker. And Nathan is currently in China, so he's got the biggest time difference from all of us. So he's a PhD candidate at the Northeast Forestry University in China, where he works under the direct leadership of Professor Jiang, who's the Executive Director of the Feline Research Centre of National Forestry and Grassland Administration. Nathan has worked with this team for over 5 years, supporting fieldwork across Northeast China and the publication of scientific research in high-quality international journals. His present research is an analysis of the relationships between tigers, their habitat at scales from global to local. He also co-designed a long-term monitoring research plan in core conservation areas in China for tigers, habitat and their prey. Nathan will be discussing assessing tiger and prey populations at a landscape scale. So enough of me talking, I'll hand straight over to Nathan. Oh, Nathan, if you want to share your video, and then you can speak as well.
Great.
There you are.
Hello,
yeah,
thanks
perfect.
very much for the introduction there, and of course for the invitation to be here today. Whichever time zone you're in, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and hello. As introduced, my name's Nathan. And today I'll talk about assessing tiger and prey populations at landscape scale. And so let's begin this presentation. So what I'll be presenting is very much based on our work that was published in Biological Conservation. And so just to point out, if anyone has extra questions that maybe we can't get through today, you can get more information in this paper, which has been shared in the abstracts shared by ZSL. And also for other work, please do check out Professor Jiang, Guangshun. You can find all of his work and all from our team. Again, the links are in the abstracts and should be in the YouTube links also. So firstly, let's start with the simple and nice introduction. So we talk about the back in the sort of beginning of 20th century, we know about the 100,000 tigers. And so for us in China, Northeast China, for Amma tiger, we're thinking about sort of 500 tigers. But same as Keshav was introducing, tiger numbers really reduced over time. So around 2000, maybe just a handful. But around that time, 1998, there's a really huge project that was established, the National Forest Protection Project. And that was really about restoring the forest, restore the prey, and restore the tigers. So eventually, over time, that gives us a slightly higher number of tigers. And the landscape I'll really focus on is this Laoyaling landscape. So that will crop up a couple of times in the presentation. Also worth just mentioning, a few years ago, 2016, the largest protected area for tigers in the world was established at about 14,500 square kilometers. So it's quite big. Now, I say it's quite big, but actually the scales we really need to be talking about are much, much larger. Just for reference, that national park is this area marked with the red outline on this map. And that Laoyaling landscape is just this one here. And so when we talk about tigers in Northeast China, really we need to talk about a whole region, which could be divided into 4 landscapes. So much, much larger. And as I say throughout the presentation, I'll be talking about this one quite a lot, Laoyaling. So for reference, it's just this portion here. Also worth just pointing out, in 2021, there's also a tiger record up here. So tigers are cropping up in other places as well. So really what we're aiming to do with this work, of course, is to identify how many tigers there are, where they are, as well as to look at the prey situation. Not just density in terms of how many prey animals there are, but also the composition of those prey. And I'll explain in a few moments as to why composition is so important. Also, we then talk about this idea of carrying capacity and how many tigers can the landscape support. And really, we're on about this, talking about area and prey density and thinking about, is it enough? Is it enough area to support long-term viability? Is it enough prey to support long-term viability? And these are really the key questions that we're looking to answer through this work. Methods. A few people on this call, I'm sure, will be very familiar with camera traps. Maybe they've used them yourself, or you've seen them on TV or social media or elsewhere. So it's the essential equipment in wildlife surveys for tigers. And we use about 1,000 cameras in this piece of work. So besides the cameras, on this map now, we can see many, many lines. These are our survey lines in the winter. We walk quite a lot. This is about 3,000 kilometers if you add them all up. So we walk in the winter in the snow. And what we're looking for is the ungulates. These are the ungulate prey animals like the wild boar and the deer. So we're looking for their footprints, and this is the way that we can survey the prey populations. Snow and winter also gives us a chance to study tigers, of course, looking for their footprints, but we can also collect some genetic samples, for example, the scats or the fecal samples, because outside at that time of year, it's about -20, -30, so it's a bit like a freezer, I guess. So it's quite good for protecting the genetic quality. And then, of course, we can put it into a slightly cooler temperature, -80, for further analysis. Now, the way that we use the camera images, I realize this is not a tiger, but the idea is very similar. We talk about leopards not changing their spots, and for tigers, it's very similar. And so what we can actually look at is the stripe pattern on a tiger and identify individuals. And then when you've got 2 images, you can just compare them. I don't want to say spot the difference, but you get the idea. We just compare the 2 images and see if it's a different individual or the same. And so effectively, we can start counting the number of individuals in the population. Sometimes it's possible also to identify sex from images. With the genetic samples, very similar process. Of course, make sure we're looking at the right species. And then identify individual and sex. In terms of the population dynamics, this is where we work out the population size and also look at the trend over time, primarily based on this capture-recapture idea, which maybe some people watching this video and joining us for this live session will be quite familiar with. Basically, it's just, if we talk about camera trap images, for example, if you keep catching the same individual again and again and again on camera, probably you've seen all individuals in that population. But maybe you might find some new individuals you never seen before. This could be for immigration, for example, from another area, or it could be some births as well. So the population will change over time. and that's something we can get through our analysis. In terms of distribution, basically we just put all of our data onto a map, just put the dots, and then we can join up those dots to figure out the kind of area where our tiger records are. There's a few more details in it, but I won't go into too much of those, but that's the basic premise. Then this idea of carrying capacity, this is really where we want to focus on. And so first off, we need to estimate the density of the prey using that winter track survey data that we collect. And the analysis is FMP. Again, I'm not going to go into details, but you can certainly find those online or in the links that we are sharing. Then what we're actually doing is we're then converting the prey density into a tiger density, because there is a very clear relationship between the two. So we can estimate if we have a certain number of prey, how many tigers could that support? But then also we need to adjust that slightly, because tigers, same as many other animals and often people, are quite choosy about what we eat. So even a population of lots of roe deer, for example, maybe isn't so great for tigers, which would require some other large herbivores like the wild boar. We can also estimate carrying capacity based on habitat and space. And we can really look at Russia as to one of their populations, which has a density of 0.22 adults per 100 kilometers square, not quite as high as the Corbett population, which Keshav introduced earlier today. So this population we might consider to be our target density. It's currently their baseline, but for us, maybe it could be our target density. But they also, in Sikote Alin, in that landscape, they also have their own target density of 0.65 if they're able to achieve their restoration goal. And so we just put it out there as to how about if we also got to 0.65 adults per 100 kilometers square. How many tiger individuals would we have in Northeast China? Then we also estimated the maximum number of adult females that could survive in each landscape by dividing the size of the landscape by the average home range size. For context, a female home range will be about 400 square kilometer. Results. So we've got about 2 million camera trap nights, quite a lot of images. Once you go through them all, you'll end up with about 55 individuals. And the thing that we should really point out here is that most of the individuals are in this Laoyeling landscape, this LYL, which I pointed out on the map at the beginning. And we see most of them are here. But elsewhere in the range, these other landscapes, literally just a handful, just 2 or 3. And we get the same when we look at our genetic data. Most of the individuals that we detected were in the Laoyeling landscape, just a handful elsewhere. So in terms of the population and the population growth in this table, many numbers, but we just focus on this column here. Basically, if we have a number of 1, it's a population which is stable, no increase, no decrease. But if it goes above 1, that would be a sign of a population increase, or below would be a population decrease. So more or less over time, we might see indication of a population increase in the recent years, but just bear in mind that is only over a very short time. So we'd really want to do this over a few more years at least. In terms of the prey, what we found in that Laoyeling landscape, lots of prey, that's good. However, most of them are roe deer, not so great if you're a tiger and you're looking for the wild boar, red deer, or sika deer, the larger prey animals. And then when we start to put all this together, we get a picture like this, where each line or each color represents a different landscape. And this bottom one represents the Laoyeling landscape, which I'll use just for a simple example. So this is about the current tiger number. But then when we think about how many prey there are, potentially the landscape could support many, many more tigers. However, because most of them are roe deer, not so many other things, the actual population is much lower that could be supported. And we're pretty much at the same amount, maybe slightly even gone past that. Now, in terms of the habitat and the space, yes, we could have a few more tigers if we increase the density, of course. And if we got to the target density of 0.65, that one, we'd have well over 100 tigers in a single landscape. But really the thing to pay attention to is this spatial support F, which is the number of females in the landscape. And this dotted line here, this vertical line, represents the number of, or the minimum number of females that a population needs for us to be considered viable, genetically viable, and for the population to continue long term. So even that landscape,
Nathan, sorry, just
large,
a
really
little
landscape,
time notification.
Great, thanks very much, Amy. So just at this point here, number of females, even in that large landscape, it's clearly not enough. And even when you start adding these landscapes together, we then might start getting over that line, which demonstrates the importance of connectivity and joining the landscapes. So in terms of the challenges, we can break it down into these four. The first would, of course, be lack of breeding females. Point number 2 is about prey and the lack of the preferred species. And I guess 3 and 4, we can combine them, thinking about landscapes and the importance of connectivity, including human land uses. And we've done lots of other work in our team. So forest cattle grazing, villages, farmlands, roads, inbreeding, all these things. I do highly recommend having a look at the links in the YouTube and also the abstracts. So just to point out the major challenges and where we need to go from here. These are what we might consider our main points, our main actions, and most of these have been integrated into the Vladivostok Declaration, which is the central point of today's discussion. Thank you very much for your attention. And of course, if you've got any questions, please ask away. And once again, thank you for your cooperation and support for tiger conservation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nathan. That was really insightful, and your research is obviously in such an interesting landscape. So we have got one question I'm going to ask you now, and then we can do some of the others in the panel. So someone has asked, how do surveys ensure tigers that cross country borders, e.g. between China and Russia, aren't counted twice? So I guess this is more a question about collaboration between researchers in different countries.
That is a very good question. Thank you, whoever asked the question. Thank you. Yes, so there is collaboration across borders, and these are very strong relationships. And of course, you know, animals will move across borders, and we see this. I'm sure down in Nepal they'll also get this. Really, borderlands are kind of the strongholds for many wildlife species, and it's certainly the same for us. And the way that we can do this, of course, for individuals, we can share databases, for example, of who's who. But when we do the density, for example, we might keep it within our landscape, just because we know where our cameras are, and we can work out the effective area, because of course density, number of tigers divided by area. So we could use that. But for double counting, yeah, it's certainly something we need to be aware of. Thanks for the question.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nathan. That was fantastic. And yeah, we'll talk more in the panel session. We are now going to be joined by Debbie Banks, the campaign leader on tigers and wildlife crime for the Environmental Investigation Agency. They are an international NGO committed to investigating environmental crime and advocating for intelligence-led solutions. Since 1996, she has investigated Asian big cat poaching and trafficking, tiger farming, and the role of organised crime in the Trans-Himalayan and Mekong region, campaigning for more effective enforcement, policy reform, and demand reduction. Debbie joined us not too long ago on our podcast, WildCats podcast, to discuss broadly around the topic of illegal trade in tiger parts. So if you're interested in her talk, please make sure to head over to wherever you get your podcast to check this out. But today, Debbie will be discussing ending tiger farming and trade, which was a priority topic at the Second International Tiger Forum and a focus for the next 12 years of tiger conservation. Please be aware that in this talk, it may feature some images and videos that some might find distressing or upsetting, and so viewer discretion is advised. With that in mind, please take it away, Debbie.
Thank you. I hope you can all see my slides. So just thank you very much, Amy, for that introduction, and thank you to ZSL for the invitation to join this webinar. I'm going to give you a rapid run through of tiger trade and tiger farming. International trade in tigers has been prohibited since the species were listed on Appendix 1 of the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, or CITES, since 1975, with the exception of the Siberian subspecies, which was added in 1987. But because of unchecked demand and poor enforcement, trafficking continues. And since the year 2000, at least 3,377 tigers have been seized in trade globally, and of those, 744 are known or suspected to have come from captive sources. These figures are a minimum based on the minimum whole animal equivalent seized, so skins, carcasses, taxidermy specimens, and live animals. And you can see from this graph of seizures since 2000 through to 2021, how the trade peaks and troughs. And the bar chart there shows the proportion of known or suspected captive tigers among those seizures, which also varies from year to year. The majority, however, are still wild tigers. And these trends together are a reminder that there is no room for complacency in combating demand and trade. On its own, however, seizure data only tells part of the story and is dependent on several factors, including enforcement effort and the regularity and accessibility of the reports of wildlife crime incidents. Seizures should not be relied upon as an indicator of effective enforcement, however. Prosecutions and the seizure of assets are key indicators of effective enforcement, and seizures themselves should be seen as the beginning of an enforcement action, not the end. Seizures are also just the tip of the iceberg, much more slips through the net. And trade observations and assessments of demand also help build up that full picture of what is really going on. This snapshot map shows the location of persistent physical trade hubs, the yellow dots, while the blue dots represent seizure locations. And so you can see here, there are some areas where trade persists and where there is little or no enforcement activity. Some of these physical trade hubs include wildlife trade tourist destinations. For example, Mongla on the border between Myanmar and China, or in parts of Laos itself. For example, the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone in the north of Laos is a sort of very persistent trade venue. Prior to the COVID pandemic, we also noted that there were tour companies from Vietnam and China that would include wildlife retail shops and resorts on the travel itinerary to Thailand and to Laos. Many of the businesses involved as retailers have always had parallel online sales platforms via social media and company websites. Some of them have their own courier companies and are able to mail and transport wildlife products. This meant that even during COVID, many of these retail outlets continue to trade throughout the pandemic. These images here are just an example of some of those products. The one at the top there is a product that is available from a tourist venue in Thailand and is openly advertised on Vietnamese travel sites, including as part of an organized bus tour itinerary. And the image at the bottom is an example of an online advert offering the same product for mail delivery in Vietnam. Every part of the tiger has a market. Bones are ground to a powder for use in traditional Chinese medicine to treat rheumatism and arthritis. Bones are also steeped in big vats of wine for commercial scale tiger bone wine sales, often purchased as prestigious gift or a non-financial bribe. Bones may also be boiled into a glue-like substance as a preferred medicinal product among Vietnamese consumers. Skins are the the item that is recovered most often in seizures, are sold for luxury home decor and taxidermy purposes, as status symbols, a use for skins that are offcuts of tigers that have been butchered for their bones, are often used to make little items like tiger skin wallets and even slippers. Teeth and claws are actually the lowest risk, highest profit items that are sold as expensive jewelry. Tiger meat is consumed as a delicacy. And we're seeing a lot more dead tiger cubs in trade. They're often mixed with other wildlife, such as bear paws, snakes and scorpions, and put into jars of wine and consumed as a status symbol. But tiger parts are not just available at physical markets. They're increasingly available online. And it's no exaggeration to say there are hundreds and hundreds of tiger traders operating online, especially via social media accounts such as WeChat, Facebook, and Zalo. And many of the offers that they make are very open and blatant. They appear to be able to operate with impunity. I'm just going to hit play on this video, so I would like to give a little warning in advance that some of you may find this distressing. That's an example of some of the social media posts that our investigators are uncovering. And in this particular instance, traders often use video of tiger butchery to convince buyers of the authenticity of their tiger products. Others will make claims about the tiger parts that they have being wild sourced. And we know from seizures and intelligence that many are actually marketing lion and other big cat parts as tiger to profit from consumer preferences. And while there is a growing awareness among enforcement agencies and social media companies about the growth of online trade, there's a long way to go to improve the responses. Persistent traders whose accounts do get closed down often pop up again under another avatar. There's a wealth of intelligence associated with social media accounts, but in some jurisdictions, enforcement agencies struggle with the sheer volume of what's being offered online or limited jurisdiction and investigative powers. I mentioned earlier that, and this is, Keshav has mentioned it as well, that there is trade in captive bred or farmed tiger parts. This is despite a CITES decision in 2007 that tigers should not be bred for their trade in their parts and derivatives. But unfortunately, as Keshav also mentioned, the commercial keeping and breeding of tigers or tiger farming has continued to grow. And between Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, China, and now even South Africa, there are over 8,500 tigers in captivity that are at risk from entering trade because of weak legislation in some countries, or the absence of legislation entirely in others. It enables the proliferation of these facilities and in some instances encourages domestic trade in the parts and derivatives of captive bred tigers. Demand has spiraled out of control as a result of the combination of this online trade, the availability of farmed tiger parts and other big cat parts marketed as tiger has increased, both the accessibility and the perceived acceptability of buying tiger parts. And trade in parts of farmed tigers has perpetuated their desirability and stimulated demand. Some people argued that tiger farming would relieve pressure on wild tigers by flooding the market with a cheap alternative, and that just hasn't happened. The combination of some consumer preferences for wild tiger and the higher cost of captive tiger parts has meant the outcome of tiger farming and trade has actually contributed to the continued poaching and trade of wild populations. Now, we've talked about tiger farming, but what do we actually mean? What do these places look like? Well, tiger farms come in all shapes and sizes. There are a couple in China that have over 1,000 tigers each, where tigers are subject to speed breeding, with cubs being removed from females and hand-reared, so the female comes into estrus again. Others in China and across Southeast Asia may have tens or hundreds of tigers in captivity. And as this video shows, these are not animals that are being raised in conditions suitable for scientific conservation breeding. You could not release these animals into the wild. So they have no real conservation value. They're purely being raised for commercial purposes. Other facilities masquerade as zoos or centers for edutainment, so a combination of allegedly education and entertainment, but many of these facilities have been caught selling tigers, live tigers, cubs in particular, that are then sold off to stock commercial facilities in Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. There have also been several instances of tiger parts being sold from captive tiger facilities that present themselves as these sort of edutainment places. So we must be suspicious of anywhere that allows visitors to handle tigers for selfies or for walking experiences. Some facilities, of course, may not breed tigers at all, but acquire cubs from other farms and then raise them to maturity before slaughtering them upon commission from buyers. So tiger farming is a catch-all phrase that really relates to a diverse type of captive tiger facility, but clearly not facilities for conservation.
Debbie, I'll just say we've got probably 1 more minute, if that's all right.
Excellent, I'm on my last slide. How do we stop the tiger farming problem? One that is clearly getting worse, not better. Political will is key, and whilst it was indeed very encouraging to read in the Vladivostok Declaration that the tiger countries have continued to express serious concern about tiger farming, and particularly encouraging because that concern wasn't actually reflected in the 2010 St. Petersburg Declaration. So that is really important. It's now recognized as a problem. But the text on that was in the preamble, not in the operative part. So we'll be very critical to see what national level actions governments will take, and just very quickly in terms of the steps to take to phase out tiger farming and reduce demand includes legislation that clearly prohibits all trade in all parts and derivatives of captive bred tigers. That will create the environment in which we can move on to the other phases. In the first instance, stopping breeding by separating sexes at least, bringing in experts that have managed rescue centres and sanctuaries where there's no breeding, buying, selling of tigers, and working with governments to come up with tailored, time-bound phase-out plans. And reiterating and emphasising that sort of zero tolerance to tiger farming and trade through the destruction of stockpiles of tiger parts and products, with the exception of those that are required for judicial purposes. And we also need to see far greater investment in targeted consumer behaviour change programmes. And if you have that multi-pronged approach, and improving and ensuring that enforcement is more effective, that is the steps to take the pathway at a national level. And of course, just very briefly, because these issues are very much on the agenda for the upcoming CITES conference, which is taking place next week in Panama, and there will be some missions to the key tiger farming countries starting in January next year, and we will be looking to use CITES because it's the only framework we have at the moment at an international level to call for time-bound country-specific measures to end tiger farming. So thank you very much. A rapid run through. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for explaining, such a topical issue so quickly for us. So I think one of the questions that's been upvoted quite a lot is there any information on what subspecies of tiger make up the bulk of the individuals in tiger farms?
It varies from country to country. In China, there are a lot of Siberian tigers in captivity. In Southeast Asia, a lot of, there's a lot of hybridization going on as well. So whether they are Bengal or Indo-Chinese, there just isn't that level of scrutiny in all of the captive tiger facilities of concern across those countries. But they are supposed to, under CITES, be working towards auditing and DNA profiling and strike pattern profiling the captive tigers. But certainly that's another reason why these tigers can't be released into the wild, because many of them, are actually hybridized, and we're seeing increasingly a lot of ligers and tigons being bred as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Debbie. So we're going to bring all of the speakers back shortly, just to do our panel discussion. We've got quite a few questions already, but let me just remind you one last time of the Pigeonhole link. So it's up on the screen at the moment, and also you can email through to this email address if you can't get onto that link for any reason, and please upvote other people's questions if you'd like to know the answer to them. And remember, if your question is for a specific speaker, please put their name at the start. Okay, so let me just stop sharing this. Bring all of our speakers back. Hello. Okay, thank you again for joining us. I know it's all really late for you guys. I think one of the first questions, Debbie, I'm going to stick with you just because it's one that's been upvoted quite a lot. What will be the fate of farmed tigers after the closure of commercial farming, and who will bear the cost of their rearing? Keshav mentioned that there's a huge dip in tiger conservation funds at the moment for things like that.
So obviously these tiger farms will not be shut down overnight. So that is why there's great value in bringing in experts who are already involved in looking after large numbers of rescued big cats, or have experience in running genuine rescue centres and sanctuaries, to develop a sort of phased phase out of tiger farming. So organizations like Big Cat Rescue, Four Paws International, Wildlife Friends Foundation Thailand, so first of all, getting those experts around the table and putting together those plans, and looking for the funding. But there are things that governments can do in the meantime, as I say, to stop the problem getting worse through stronger legislation.
Fabulous, thank you. So another question that we've had is, it's great to hear about the knock-on benefits of tiger conservation for other species and habitats, but are there any anecdotes of examples of this that you could share? Maybe Keshav, have you got any? Or can talk around this a bit more?
What is that? Could you come again?
Yeah, of course. So it's great to hear about the knock-on benefits of tiger conservation for other species and habitats. But are there any kind of stories that you have of or examples of this that you can share? Or like how this happens?
Yes, I'd love to. Actually, there is a national park in Sariska, close to Delhi. In 2005, all tigers from this national parks were poached. Now, this park has a very strong prey base, but the moment the tigers were poached, there was a huge demand to open up this area for mining and for exploitation and other things, because with the tiger being there is a higher status of a tiger park. Once the tigers were gone, they were trying to push it down to a sanctuary level and to open up a lot of other commercial activities inside the park. So the tigers were quickly brought back and relocated in 2006, 2007 in this park, as a result of which this whole thing, this attempt by some people was nipped in the bud. So what is happening is that tigers give stature, and the level of management and the level of people who are actually taking care of the field directors and other things, there is a great amount of professionalism which is present. There is a more intense frontline staff and better deployment. So it is bringing in a much better management practices in the tiger parks. If you really compare it to parks which do not have tiger, there is a huge difference between the tiger parks and the other parks in terms of management effectiveness. And so that's really making a difference. I hope I answered that question. But just one issue I wanted to convey what Debbie was saying, if you don't mind my chipping in. There's a lot of, as Debbie said, there's a lot of effort to prove that tiger farms are actually good. And they are actually, because there's a market demand, and they are, because of that, tigers, wild tigers are being saved. But my contention has always been simple. Wherever there are tiger parks, tigers have gone progressively extinct. They went extinct in China, and now there is this new thing happening. They went extinct in Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. And tiger parks are in Thailand and Malaysia, wherever they are, tigers are going down. And so, tiger parks have an extremely adverse impact on tigers in the wild. And we have to understand that very carefully.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great answer. And Nathan, I think you've put your hand up to add in on that. Oh, sorry, I can't hear you. It doesn't say you're muted, but oh, that's better. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, just to add in on the tigers benefiting other species. Firstly, we think about biodiversity globally and where kind of the hotspots of biodiversity might be, like Amazon, Central Africa forest, Indonesia, like island of Borneo, these places. But just the tiger range, the places with the tigers are within like the top 30% of the best habitat for biodiversity. So actually, as a conservation strategy, specifically thinking about the kind of protect 30% of the planet by 2030, these targets, or 50% by 2050. If we're prioritizing areas for conservation, if we prioritize areas with tigers, it will also be protecting the global biodiversity as well. And then just to add in a second point about kind of the ecological perspective, one onto the other. We're doing some work, hopefully it'll be published next year, but it's basically the effect of tigers and kind of their knock-on effect, kind of their top-down effect. And where we don't have tigers, we might see many of the meso predators, we might say, like the foxes and the kind of middle-level carnivores. And if there's so many of those, maybe the small mammals are actually suffering. So actually, by restoring tigers, we can actually restore small mammals. And if we restore small mammals have a function of carrying seed, burying seed, and they're actually restoring the forest. So tigers can help to regenerate forest through their effect on small mammals. That's just the work. Let's see what comes out next year, but just so I'll add that in.
Yeah, brilliant. Little ecosystem engineers, little gardeners. Fantastic. So the next question I have is for Bhagawan. So it looks like someone has asked, the Nepalese government is building a border road along the Nepal-Indian border. Is this going to affect the connectivity between the tiger populations of Nepal and India? And are there any plans to mitigate this? So I guess, yeah, this is specifically to do with Nepal, but I kind of think it opens up the question about linear infrastructure in general.
Yeah, I think, and that's a very important question. These road networks already, fragmented our habitat, So along this, what we say, Hulaki Marga, this highway that connects from east to west, that along the Nepal-India border. And this is a very serious, issue that we have been discussing in Nepal also. Recently, government of Nepal approved linear infrastructure guidelines, that has actually, opened the eye that the infrastructure, companies, they have to consider wildlife friendly infrastructure, including, underpass and bypass. We hope that in future, investment infrastructure work, definitely they have to follow that. But now, this very serious, issue that, we can just discuss among the conservationists, but we cannot do more about this because this is purely development work. Yeah, but of course,
can I come in on this, please?
Please, sir, go ahead.
This problem was discussed with me yesterday because there is a reluctance. This road is coming where the SSB is deployed on the entire border, if you know, and Indian government is funding it. And there is a reluctance to create causeways on that road for animal movement as mitigating measures. So we are taking it up, this issue, with the government, state government of Uttar Pradesh, government of India, that this cannot be allowed because there is already a agreement with regard to mitigating the adverse impact of this road. Actually, this road has also led to cutting down of a lot of mature trees in that area, and the state government was very, very concerned about it. So, there is this issue of engineers who are totally insensitive, and they're going ahead and creating linear infrastructure without taking into consideration any of these mitigating measures. So we have to really clamp down on these guys.
So, Dudhwa National Park and then our Lalzari corridor that has been already disconnected by the road, So there is no communications. Exactly. Kataniagar also. There is no communications, of wildlife between the two areas. It used to be before. So it has actually, restricted the movement of animals. Yeah. We, with the support from the IUCN, Nepal government recently radio collared, 2-3 tigers along the highway, and we found that, tigers are actually, restricted the movement by this road network. So yeah, and we have already evidence that that our engineers should consider in the linear infrastructure guideline that the government actually approved.
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. So unfortunately, that's kind of brought us to the end of the amount of time that we have for these panel discussion, even though we've got loads of questions. But thank you all of our fantastic speakers tonight for taking part in tonight's event, and to our brilliant audience for asking all of these amazing questions. We're almost at the end of the event, and I've just got a couple more things to share with you first. So please don't go anywhere just yet. Okay, let me share this with you. Okay, so to everyone who tuned in this evening, live this evening, we would really like to hear what you thought and what you would like to see in our sorry, I'm just going straight through this. It's what you thought about tonight's events. So please head over to SurveyMonkey, which is right at the bottom of this slide here. So www.surveymonkey.com/r/ZSL NOV 2022. 22, or you can scan the QR code here on your phones too, which will probably be quite a lot easier. Our next event will be on the 10th of January in the new year. And we will be back in person again in our Huxley Lecture Theatre, where we'll be discussing how to save coral reefs one species at a time. We also have our first in-person symposium in 3 years happening in a couple of weeks, and there are still spaces available if you're interested in connectivity across coastal habitats and seascape restoration. So you can find out more about the information about that and all of our upcoming events on www.zsl.org/science/events. And so that's some of the information on that slide there. And if you don't want to miss anything, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. And follow us on Twitter and Facebook at these various handles. Also, our website has plenty of other resources like the ZSL Wild Science podcast, and also information about how to get involved with ZSL by donating, volunteering, or becoming a ZSL fellow. So thank you again to our amazing speakers. I know they were all in various time zones, Nepal, India, China and Scotland, Debbie. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you all next time, and good night. Thank you.